Go Jackets.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Just want to make a video. I know this is kind of old news by this point. I was talking about it with Sea Dog on the way to the Slobs, though, and it's if you haven't seen, Florida State and Clemson have basically made it known that they're not at all happy with their situation in the ACC. And I'll be honest, I understand their argument. What they're saying is, we drive far more of the revenue that comes into the conference than what we get back from the ACC. So all that money is divided evenly. I think I saw for the SEC it was right at $50 million per school. For the ACC, I think it's about $36 million per school. The argument Florida State and Clemson are going to make is, hey, obviously we drive far more revenue than some of these other markets like Wake Forest, Boston College. I'm just looking down the list here. Virginia Tech. We're contributing far more than we're getting. And again, I get it. I mean, I think we've all been in a situation in a job where it's like, hey, I'm doing most of the work and I'm holding this thing together and I'm not being compensated fairly for it. So I looked up the numbers. The AD for Florida State had a number of like what we're receiving versus what we're contributing. Now, what makes this really complicated, and honestly, I'm really pissed at the ACC because the ACC has handled this situation about as poorly as possible. Not the situation that's just come forward, but they, first of all, there's a grant of rights that's given. So even if Florida State and Clemson left, per this contract, like all their media rights would still go to the ACC and then get divvied up between the ACC schools, even if they weren't in it. And these TV contracts and everything are signed for the next 13 years until 2036, which makes zero sense. The ACC has absolutely boggled this. And Maryland looks like a genius all of a sudden because they got out and gotten probably the second biggest revenue conference in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten just signed, $1 billion like a year media deal. And they're reaping the benefits of that because they're getting an equal share of everything. So what do we do from here and what does this mean for Georgia Tech? And this is what's got to frustrate you. And I hate to keep beating a dead horse with it, but this is what's got to frustrate you with Jeff Collins because he's put us in a horrible position for probably the most tumultuous conference, or not probably, it absolutely is the most tumultuous kind of conference realignment and instability we've ever seen in college football. We've already seen like USC and Cal, I think, are leaving the Pac-12 and going to the Big Ten. So who knows what's going to happen with the Pac-12. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma leaving, coming to the SEC. Like, there's all this movement going on, and it's all, driven by revenue. So what does this mean for the ACC and Georgia Tech? So one thing that could happen is that other schools agree to take less of the cut. So they could agree to having inequity where teams like Florida State and Clemson get a bigger portion of the pie. Now, that's probably never going to happen. For instance, Georgia Tech is never going to agree to that because we're already in an extremely stretched financial situation now. And we're trying to right the ship there, but we're going to say, hey, I get it, but someone else needs to take less. All right, so we're not going to take less, and every team is going to feel that way. Boston College, Wake Forest, Duke, all those schools are going to say someone else needs. It's like this is why, and maybe this is completely off the rails. This is why you see storefronts and complexes in New York that have been vacant for a decade. And it's because an investment corporation owns that building, and there's different tranches of investors. So the top tranche is going to say, yeah, take less rent so that our risk is lessened. The bottom tranche is going to burden the risk more than the top, and these different levels of tranches are never going to agree on any decision. So they just sit vacant. And it's the same situation with the ACC. None of these teams are going to agree to take less so that someone else can take more. They're all going to point fingers at the other school. Now, the problem is that we can't just let this situation stay as it is for 10 years. Clemson and Florida State will leave. I think the AD approached the ACC for what the buyout cost would be, which is about $120 million. Now, that doesn't include like the media rights and revenue and stuff. That's what makes it complicated. But there could be an interesting situation where they leave and possibly another media conglomerate agrees to shoulder the burden of the legal proceedings and say, yeah, we'll take the risk and we'll litigate with this grant of rights access owners, whoever that is. I'm not exactly sure how it works, and we'll take care of that for you. But as far as litigation like that is concerned, when you're talking about it on that level, I mean, these are things that can go on 5-10 years, tied up in litigation. So that's not an ideal situation. But this is the ACC's fault. You have to be ahead of the curve in these things, especially with how much the game of college football has changed in just the last 5 years. As a conference, you have to be proactive in aligning yourself to be in the best position possible. And signing yourself through 2036 is completely dumb. That makes zero sense. It'd be interesting to see if someone does a video. Like, maybe I'll research that. Like, how did that come to be? So option one, that other teams take less, there's a 0% chance, I think, that happens. What else could happen? Well, I suppose, there's been rumblings of a merge between the Big East, or not the Big East. What am I saying? Big East doesn't exist anymore. The Big Ten and the ACC. Now, the problem with that is I believe they both have 14 teams, so they're not going to take every team from the ACC. And this is what pisses you off with Collins and having us in such a weakened position with how poor our performance has been over the past 3 years. I don't know how attractive Georgia Tech will be. I obviously think we'd be in the running. The Atlanta market and the Georgia market that the Big Ten doesn't have is huge. Ow! I'm still recovering from the Slob Olympics. So the Georgia market would be huge for the Big Ten, but we would all be fighting for a spot at the table. And would that be a situation where the Big Ten potentially, can the Big Ten kick out teams and then create this super conference? Aside from the ACC remaining how it is and us figuring something out, I honestly think, and I hate to say it, I mean, I love the ACC. That's probably the second best scenario, is that the ACC and Big Ten combine to make a super conference that competes with the SEC. But that would spell the end of the Power Five. I mean, honestly, we've really already spelled the end of the Power Five. For instance, if Clemson and Florida State left, people would probably look at the ACC as a group of five, or group of five conference. And the same thing's happening, with USC and Cal leaving, and Texas and Oklahoma leaving. Are the conferences they're leaving, are those still Power Five conferences, especially if they're bringing in teams like BYU or whoever? App State, would the ACC bring App State in, or Georgia State? It wouldn't be a great look. But yeah, something's got to happen. I mean, this is as much a legal issue as it is anything. I mean, would the ACC be willing to be now reactive and try and like that's probably the number one thing the ACC needs to do right now is try and get out of this contract somehow. Even if they have to eat some money and everyone has to eat the same, loss fairly, and then restructure things like Clemson. I get it. Clemson and Florida State are huge markets, but there's other big markets, too. Like, just the entire Southeast, Duke, North Carolina, Miami, has a pretty big following. There's no reason that we have such a doo-doo media grant of rights nonsense deal. So I would like to see the ACC really react now and get ahead of this thing. You cannot sit on your heels on this. If the ACC just says, hey, we're going to wait and see what happens, that's the end of it. There's going to be no more ACC. And Clemson and Florida State are going to leave. And I don't know where they'd go. Would the SEC take them? I mean, how many teams are in that? Like, is the SEC going to end up having like 20 teams? Like, I don't know. But we'll just have to wait and see. From what I've seen on the basketball side, Georgia Tech beat Florida State yesterday, and they're either tied up or within a point now at half. So we need to start getting some victories in it, and it's going to be pivotal that Georgia Tech has a really good showing next year and strengthens their position in all this conference realignment. But like I said, like for a conference like the Big Ten or whoever, like that Georgia-Atlanta market's going to be huge, and I think that alone is going to position Georgia Tech well if we did have to make a move. So let me know what you think. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think about how the ACC has handled this? Do you agree with Clemson and Florida State, or do you think they're just kind of crying over whatever? Let me know in the comment section. Also, last time I'll mention it, if you want some free WreckTalk gear, I'm going to link it in the description. Tiger Cat's video over something that happened at the Slob Olympics as it pertained to WreckTalk. If you go on her video, linked in the description, leave a comment. I'll select someone at random for some free WreckTalk gear or college gear of your choice up to $50. So you guys have a good one.